Everybody, we're joined here today with Scott Mercer, who is the lead system designer for Overwatch. We were asking some of your colleagues some questions about the rank system, and they said that you'd be the man to talk to ask our burning questions.
I am, in fact, the man to talk to burning questions about competitive play, so let's go.
Okay, so I don't want to sound like an angry forum troll ranting out these questions, but to some degree as a hardcore player we always sound that way.
Hit me.
I want to be thankful for the new hero we got, especially the replay system. That's right up my alley. But where are we sitting at with the ranked mode, and what are some goals for it moving forward?
Sure. So you mentioned the replays, and I think in terms of like looking at our competitive mode, I think there's some things we've been doing, and I just want to start with that and go with like what we're like looking towards doing in the future. So I think what you're seeing with competitive play, we've been like trying to iterate, find these like new like sort of mini seasons. I think they've been taken pretty well. Like right now we're running competitive like team deathmatch. Actually, like the feedback for that's been like really positive. People like really seeing a lot of like really cool like chill like matches that are still pretty like competitive, and they're like actually forming like a team deathmatch meta. It's actually been really exciting to see, and we're gonna keep on doing those kinds of things to like provide some like spice throughout like the normal competitive seasons. And then I think in terms of like what we want to do with competitive play forward, like we've really been sort of trying to ask ourselves with competitive play. It's like, hey, why are people like wanting to play competitive? It's like, and from talking to a lot of people, getting a lot of feedback, there's a lot of different like reasons we've actually found out. Some people just like the mode, that they like it, that it's fair. They like that it feels a little bit more real necessarily than quick play. I like the feeling of it, like just that little edge of competitiveness is like really good. But then they're not necessarily like into like winning at all costs, like that kind of like strong thing. They just want to have a good time, but they want it to be fair, competitive, and they want to play with players that also have that same kind of goal. And then we also have like I think a large number of players that they're playing competitively because they want to improve, and that's something I think in the past we haven't done as good a job as we really should have. And I think that's where I think what you see with the Overwatch World Cup viewer, and that in our minds that's sort of like step one, and then providing more tools for the players who want to improve, giving them the means to actually do so. So like looking at the World Cup viewer now, yeah, you can watch the games live, and that's really cool. And you can do that from like whatever angle. So if it's like, hey, if I'm a Widowmaker player, who's better to look at than Carpe, right? And if Carpe plays Widowmaker like on the World Cup in the finals, then you can like look at that.
And I will.
Okay, awesome. But then like it's not just like watching them live; it's replay as well, right? So with the World Cup viewer, we'll be able to see all the World Cup games like for a month, be able to analyze them, look at them, get like all the tips and tricks. Like people are already seeing like even like overnight. There's been like I've been looking at a lot of like social media. People are like suddenly discovering all these like little tricks that like the really like these top-notch players are doing that they didn't know before, because the camera was concentrating on your Widowmakers, like the big team fights, but not necessarily seeing like the little things, those little tricks, right? The things where you ask yourself, it's like, hey, what should I really be doing? What should I be looking for? Like, what do the top players do? And that you'll start to see some of that. But I think what's really cool is like this is like it's been a great beta. We've gotten a lot of good feedback on it so far. But we want to like translate that over to being able to look at your own replays, like look at your own like games, see like, hey, how could we like potentially won that team fight? Like, I got surprised by this other character. I got surprised by this like cowboy that got behind me and then like fanned me, right? Like, how did he even get back there? It's like, well, now I can go to that point in the game, go backwards, look at it, and see like how they did that. So I think there's going to be a lot more like knowledge that'll come out of like that system once we get it like really going like next year. And I think along with that, like I think we're also like looking forward to, along with replays, also adding a bit more match history. I know totally like there's a lot of people where it's like, hey, we don't really have a lot of like good stats about like what happened during a match. And for us, like we want to provide them, we just want to do it like after the game in a situation where you can like look at them, you've been able to calm down, like taking some of the emotion out of like the actual game that just happened, and really be able to analyze and say like, hey, well, this is what I did well, this is what I didn't. We want to try to integrate the replays into that. So for the people that want to like improve, we feel like those tools will really help them to do that. And I think, again, talking to a lot of people, that's what they sort of really want out of it. You can talk to people and say like, hey, how do I become a grandmaster? If you ask that question, it's it's really hard to answer. It's like
play Brigida.
Sorry.
That was not fair of me.
Sure, but it's like it can't be just about like playing Brigida or like we'll shoot more heads, right? Overwatch. What's really beautiful about it as a competitive game is that there's so much like awesome decision making to be had. Where do I stand? What is like looking out and seeing? It's like, well, the enemy team has this composition. Maybe we should try this other composition. Even if we don't have like time for switch, like what should our team be doing? What kind of plays should we be making? Should we be like super aggressive or should we not? There's so much like awesome decision making that's hopefully like all these systems will help with that. And once we get these like tools out there, I think it's going to be great for the community because we'll see a lot of content. People like have like already like starting to dig into like the World Cup viewer, making like starting to make these like videos or at least clips of people watching them, and that stuff's gonna be really exciting. So like people will be able to see, they'll be able to get tips and tricks not just from watching the pros, but from other like analysts talking about the pros. And having all that kind of like content was just gonna be a wonderful thing for competitive play in general.
Did you want to say something, Ed?
Yeah, I was going to say that one of the hardest challenges to the ranked mode, as far as I see it, is that when you watch the top level of play, Overwatch is, let's call that game A, and then the experience that people have in ranked is very different to that, for very obvious reasons, like not as much coordination, skill gap, all that kind of stuff. How do you guys look to bridge that gap so that the play experience for players in ranked is more comparable? What I'm asking is, how can we make ranked more of a serious playground for people that want to try and want to improve and want to emulate their heroes? Because I think the way the system is now, there are some serious challenges to being able to play like that. Because people can't pick their teammates, they can't say, for example, they can't pick a map that they want to get really good at because they've watched all the demos of South Korea on Numbani.
Right.
And they can't queue for that map to get good at specific skill sets, like one at a time. Do you guys have any thoughts or plans to kind of give the players more agency in that way so that the level of the ranked play can be more like the pros?
Sure. So, I mean, very recently we did add like I think one important tool for players, that's LFG. You talk about, because you are correct in that they're like, when we bring people into competitive play, there are people with like different goals. Maybe I'm really trying to work on this particular hero and get really good at it, so I'm probably not going to switch because this is what I'm practicing. Some people, again, they're trying to like it's all about winning and so forth. Other people are just trying to get good. Other people they're just trying to like relax. Strangely enough, competitive can be a relaxing thing for some people. At the end of the day, after a really like stressful day at work or something, they come back and play competitive again to stress. But LFG can help you because you can bring people together that have the similar goals. It's like, hey, if you're all trying to get better and like you're trying a particular team composition, you can find those people, work out like, hey, what composition are we going to run before you even get into the map. It's way easier talking about that kind of stuff before you get into the game than actually like in the middle of it, because then like the stress really starts to kick in. So I think LFG can help with that. In terms of like practicing on particular maps, like if you're doing it with like a group of friends and like you want to like play, you can always put up a custom game. And custom games, it doesn't affect your skill rating at all, but maybe that's okay. Like if all you're really trying to do is get like really good at a particular map because like you and your friends are about to go into a local like tournament at some LAN center somewhere, and you're going to be playing on this one map, go into custom games, right? Figure out like all that kind of stuff there. Like the actual like the competitive like matchmaking, like the normal like competitive play doesn't have to be the end all be all. There's a lot of different places that can help you. You just have to be like willing to like find other people that share that same kind of interest, and then those tools open up to you.
Interesting. This is a really great conversation, and it's bridging a lot of different points. And I think the disconnect that maybe people that I would represent or players like us is that in order to satisfy all of these different types of groups, compromises are made like everywhere, right? All of the time, it seems.
I don't know if like compromise is necessarily the right word, and we have to be like mindful of them. One player, I mean, do you have any particular examples that you want to mention?
For example, I love LFG. I think it's
Sure.
great, and I know a lot of our fans love LFG. We've tried to get them to do it, but there's a fall off there around Masters where it's just a wasteland, and
Sure.
And not only is it that way, try not to get too into the minutia of my own story here, but I have to use like our platform to find teammates that I can queue with, because teaming at that rank, granted it was worse before when the matchmaker kind of was probably unfavorable to teams too much. Now it's a bit more fair, and I'm very happy that that's the case. But the games are just harder. They're simply on a different... And my issue with this is because when rank is assigned, you get the same number based on whatever route you take. And what I have found, and I think I can empirically say this, is that a player who's rated at like 4.2k in solo might not be ready for 3.6 in a full team. It's that much harder. Like I would say about 500 to 600 SR difference. If I just pluck a player out who's never played in a team before, they're very likely to just be too green and not get it. And of course I am biased towards one of those other groups that's more hardcore, and I'm looking for that more hardcore experience, but because we're basically rewarding every route to the same way, I don't think the cream rises to the top as well as it could have if it was more strict in another way, or if we had another mode. Like I asked Jeff for a team queue day one when I met him. I was like, team queue? He's like, no.
Yeah, it's interesting because you mentioned someone who's like a 4-2, 4-2, someone who's a grandmaster level. Most all those players can communicate. Like part of the reason they are 4-2, they might queue solo, but they still can work well with the team. Like if those players couldn't, they wouldn't be at that 4-2. I mean, sure, there's nothing quite like the experience of, having a team playing together over and over and over, practicing together, learning each other's strengths and weaknesses. That's an amazing experience. It's just difficult for us in an automated fashion to do that, given that people's lives and everyone has different schedules and so forth. It's a lot of we love the concept of team queue. Like our initial plans for competitive play have revolved around team queue, but just one of the big things that we've learned is that it's just really difficult to keep those kinds of teams together, in a modern day where everyone's schedules is so difficult. And because we need enough teams, matchmaking is great when there's lots of people in the pool, right? So you talk about how it's a similar kind of thing with LFG too. It's like LFG around 2,500 if you're a gold or platinum player, they're great, right? You get up to masters and grandmasters, there's just not that many of you at that point. There's not as many.
You'd be waiting a day or something.
There's not many. There's not many masters and grandmasters. I think is people think there's a lot out there, and there's really not. So finding really good quality match with those is always going to be a bit more difficult because there's just not a larger pool to work with. So and team Q sort of makes that potentially really bad. Trying to find.
But what about events? What about timed events at a Friday or something?
It's something we've thought about. It's not when I say these things, it's not saying that they're completely off the table. They're just challenges and things that we look at and say hey, would it be better for us to work on systems and things that would help everyone, or do we work on these small systems that not even necessarily small, but these important systems for that community, and if we have the time and if we'd be excited to work on it, it's just there's some other things.
Speaking of time, I want to make sure, how much time do we have left?
Up to 350, so another 6 minutes.
So to this point, teaming is complicated, right? Mm-hmm. So because of that, the team thing is more my bias, but I want to promote for people who really want a competitive solo queue experience as well. And the biggest thing, and we're going to say the word, and I know...
I'm guessing what you're about to say. Go ahead.
Right. Some type of role queue, or even if it's not role queue, something that sort of stabilizes the experience so that it's not so
doesn't
unreliable.
Feel like a lottery, right? With your team.
Right. It's very unreliable. Even at the highest ranks, it feels that way.
Again, at the highest ranks, it's going to feel worse. There's not as many players, right? And there's always going to be a certain random element to that. Totally understand that. We are thinking about role queue. We know. There's been so much in the community. There are definitely some problems that would be assisted and helped by addition of role queue. Right now we're going through the process of looking at say, hey, if we did it, what other after effects might there be to that? How would it affect queue times? How would it and that's one of the big things, how would it affect players' abilities to change their strategies? One of the things that I think people like about Overwatch is the ability to change strategies on the fly. We could implement it in different ways, and some or allow more flexibility than others. Like, what's the right thing there? So I think we're really right now like going through like sort of a hardcore like design phase of trying to figure out, hey, if we did it, what's the best way to do it, and then figuring out like, hey, if this is the best way to do it, then given all the other like variables, is that still a great thing for the Overwatch competitive community? And it very well might be. Like I said, we're still talking about it. We're definitely not saying no to role queue. It's just something we need to give a little bit of thought, not just a lot of thought to, because it has such far-reaching implications that might not be so obvious at first glance, but we're really treating the issue very seriously.
Okay, I want to make sure I fully extinguish this, because I think the entire Overwatch community is wanting me to be able to express this to you. I was just downstairs with like 100 creators, and they're all like, "Oh, make sure you mention role queue. Make sure you mention. You better ask about role queue." So,
no problem.
To clarify, I think especially at the point of the game being out this long, the community, as far as everybody I know, is willing to make these sacrifices, whatever it's going to be, and to move that along, because the ranked works well for some of the, like we mentioned, like 3 groups basically. I think the less you're looking for it to be a reliable competitive experience, the more you can just hop in and do your thing,
totally,
basically. And especially when you are looking to take the game more seriously, it feels like ranked isn't exactly bringing that experience.
Again, we know. We absolutely think it would be a help in so many situations. Like I said, but it's one thing to understand it is not the silver bullet that's going to like potentially like solve all like competitive issues. Even if we say something, even if we implement a system where it's like 2 tanks, 2 supports, 2 damage dealers, what if the tanks are chosen, like I say, is like Zarya, Roadhog, but you're really looking for a barrier tank, right? There's still like a lot of like flexibility even within those roles, and our heroes are like, there's so many like different kind of like heroes. There's like, you think of like sort of the main tanks versus the off tanks, the long range, even among DPS, there's projectile versus hit scan versus like, there's so many different like damage dealers that we have there, saving and supports, that I think the issues that people have where it's like, oh man, I just wish we had like a tank, and like, yeah, 1 tank would be great, but like what they're really asking for, man, it'd be really great to have a Reinhardt, right? And I don't know if we necessarily want to go down the road of like saying like, hey, even if within role queue, it shouldn't be the Reinhardt queue, right? So again, it's like I said, we're working through the issues. Like I said, we're treating it very seriously. We know it's something that the community really is excited about, and we're going to see where that takes us.
Okay, that's a really good answer. I think ultimately, have the more agency the players feel like they can have. I think that's a key word, because it's not. I don't think it's just me wanting to be selfish about it.
Totally.
I think it's like the experience itself. It's too loose and it's hard to grip on and that's be consistent.
We've been trying to provide that kind of thing. Like we love the idea, and that's why we did LFG, right? LFG does give you like a whole lot of like agency in terms of it just requires a bit of like upfront work in terms of like forming that team. And I think players are really looking to say like, hey, can that be more automatic? Like the convenience of clicking a button and blam, you're in a game is amazing and awesome. Can we blend a little bit of that like agency with like that kind of like speed and like how easy it is? So it's just finding the right balance there, and that's our challenge.
Okay, Ed, did you have any other points to this?
I did. When you spoke about the main tank example, oh man, I wish I had a Reinhardt. Actually, what I think that is it's not as specific as that. It might be in that match, but the reaction, I think, at least it is when it happens to me, is not, oh, I wish I had this specific hero. It's, I wish my time wasn't being wasted by having lopsided teams. It's actually a bigger issue than like an individual hero or role. It's not that any of our criticism of ranked is necessarily the system. It's like, we love the game, and we love it when both sides are trying, and we want more of that experience and less downtime, or it's unfair to call, it's a bit critical, but like we want less trash matches basically, where because we can't choose like how we queue in a variety of ways, we end up with teammates who aren't in voice and who don't want to play the game, essentially. And the reason why we advocate for things like role queue is because we believe that that's a system, even if it has compromises in terms of like, do you lock the roles in a role queue,
sure.
you know, things like that. Even if you're making compromises, is the end result more better matches, right?
And that's exactly what we're looking at. Like, there will be compromises, you know, we know that's the case, but like, again, does it make the game overall a more fun place to play? Do you get more like high quality matches?
Yeah.
You know, we turn to talk about matchmaking and everything else. That's what we talk about, and you know, it's like, hey, are there better matches? When we improve the matchmaker, it's like, hey, are we doing more for everyone in terms of like making for better matches? And that's why we put in things like, you know, the SR limits. You know, there's all these like rules we've added in over time to try to help, you know, people go onto Reddit or say something on social media. It's like, oh, I had this horrible match. Like, there was this like person that shouldn't have been in my match. I have no idea why they were there. And in some cases, we go like, okay, yeah, we can make a rule that tries to prevent that. And we've done that like over the last couple of years. When you go back, we haven't necessarily made a huge deal about it, but there's been lots of like small iterative changes to the matchmaker that try to address those issues when you come up and you're like, what was that match? Like, why did that just happen? And I think role queue is definitely, it's unfortunately it's not like a small thing, it's a pretty big one, so we're just going to be careful of taking that step.
Is there any progress towards any of the social features that were mentioned quite a while back? And you know, I think Matt Hawley described it as LFG was kind of the crawl, and there's looks for a run and a walk and a run. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely still more social stuff we want to work on. We had to, I think guilds was something that people like really had a lot of excitement about.
And clan matchmaking, maybe,
yeah,
you know,
and
stuff like
that's the
that.
kind of thing of like, unfortunately, it's something we've had to delay. You know, there's dependencies across, you know, all of Blizzard there with our designs. So it's something we still want to do. I wouldn't necessarily look for it in like any kind of short term, but it's still, I think, something we want to work towards because we understand how that kind of social tool can be very powerful, allowing you to like quickly find, you know, LFG is a great step, but like guilds is like even better because then it's like you log on and it's like shout out to your guild mates and like, hey, who wants to like play or like,
right.
Oh yeah, sure.
Instead of doing my own Discord server
right.
to like try to manage that myself.
Yeah,
that being in game would be
yeah,
great.
we know why it would be such a great feature, and we'll get there.
Okay.